The blade in Red's hand didn't tremble, but his breathing did. 9 years of loyalty. 9 years standing beside Bumpy Johnson as his right-hand man. And tonight, in this cramped elevator car, Red was about to end it all. The plan was simple. Wait for the doors to close. Pull out the knife. One clean slash across the throat. No gunfire. No witnesses. Vanish before anyone could ask questions. The elevator doors slid shut. No escape now. Red reached into his sleeve, drew out the blade thin as a cold breath. Bumpy stood in front of him, back turned, vulnerable, the perfect opportunity. No one could get away in a steel box suspended between floors. Red raised the knife. 1 beat, 2 beats. He positioned the steel right behind Bumpy's neck. Just 1 more inch, and it would all be over. But before the blade touched skin, Bumpy spoke, without turning, without flinching, without a trace of fear. Just 1 sentence, 5 words, ringing out in that stifling space like metal striking stone. "I've been waiting for this, Red." The knife froze mid-air. No one spoke, no one breathed heavily. Suddenly Red understood. This plan had never been a secret. Bumpy had known. And the only question left was since when. The answer would drag all of Harlem into a night it would never forget. 9 years before that evening in the elevator, Clarence Red Talbot was just a scrawny errand boy, eyes always cast down to the ground, scraping by on spare change picked up from illegal gambling dens along Lenox Avenue. Harlem, back then, was reeling from raids by Italian mobs trying to seize the policy banks from black hands, and gunmen from the Bronx showed up on every corner like they owned the place and could declare who it belonged to. Red was just one of countless young men in Harlem trying to survive the violence, but fate singled him out on a night no one saw coming. That night, Red got caught in the crossfire between 2 armed crews. One side Italian thugs out for blood to intimidate Harlem, the other a few black enforcers trying to take back money that had been stolen. Red wasn't with either side, but the Italians spotted him in the wrong place at the wrong time. One grabbed his collar, shoved a gun in his face, and said Harlem wasn't for you people anymore. Red hadn't even responded when a figure stepped out from a dark alley. No footsteps, no warning. Just the click of Bumpy Johnson's snub-nosed revolver being cocked. 3 seconds later, Red no longer had a gun to his head. The man threatening him lay sprawled on the pavement, and Bumpy just glanced at him. "Come with me if you want to live to see the weekend." From that moment, Red never left Bumpy's side for a single day. Harlem had plenty of people loyal to Bumpy, but Red was different. He worked without complaining, without grabbing credit, without acting like he knew better. Red was quiet, careful, and most importantly, smart. When Bumpy handed him documents, Red memorized every figure exactly. When Bumpy held closed-door meetings with people whose identities had to stay absolutely secret, Red stood outside the door and never asked a single unnecessary question. When Bumpy needed someone to deliver envelopes to judges who'd taken money but wanted to pretend they were clean, Red handled it so smoothly, no one ever knew how the envelope got there. In just 6 months, Red became Bumpy's shadow. He went with Bumpy to every secret meeting, weekday nights in nameless basement bars, talks with pastors, community leaders, Italian Mafia guys wanting to negotiate. Wherever Bumpy needed someone at his back, Red was there. When Harlem's policy banks needed every dollar accounted for precisely, Red handled it. He never touched a cent that wasn't his, and that was what Bumpy valued most about him. The Harlem underworld had no shortage of guys loyal to money, but people loyal to principles, ones who wouldn't sell themselves out, were rare. Bumpy didn't trust many people, but Red was one of the few exceptions. Once in 1952, when Mame Bumpy's wife was cornered by two drunk thugs from Brooklyn trying to rob her jewelry. Red threw himself into the fight, beating both off until his own teeth were bloodied. That night, Bumpy brought him into the office and said just one thing: "You got my back. From now on I got yours." Those words were like a contract that didn't need signing. But loyalty isn't made of metal. It doesn't stay solid just because you want it to. Red's life started cracking in its deepest place. His family, his older sister Lottie, the one who'd raised him after their mother died young, was diagnosed with an illness requiring special surgery. The kind of surgery Harlem hospitals couldn't do. They demanded transfer to a hospital across town, with costs far beyond anything someone in the rackets could clean enough money to cover. Red never talked money with Bumpy. That was one reason Bumpy trusted him. Red didn't ask for raises, didn't beg, didn't complain. But this time, he started hiding medical papers in his jacket. Bumpy saw them but didn't ask. Red didn't ask Bumpy for a single dime. And that was the problem. For men like Red, poverty was bearable, danger was bearable, even prison was bearable. But watching the person you love most waste away, that's what ate away at their soul the fastest. Red started leaving early and coming back late. He took calls that he immediately hung up when Bumpy walked into the room. He told small lies, things he'd never done before. He started showing up in neighborhoods Bumpy never went to. Bumpy saw it all, but he didn't rush, because he knew not everyone who betrays wants to betray. Some men get pushed to the edge by life, and they fall because they have no choice left. Harlem is a place that turns men into legends, but also breaks them in ways no one expects. And Red was slowly being broken. The seed of betrayal had sprouted, but it hadn't bloomed yet, hadn't taken shape, hadn't become the thin cold blade pressed behind Bumpy's neck in the elevator tonight. The question wasn't whether Red would betray. The question was when and for what. And somehow Bumpy Johnson had seen it all coming. The Gagliano family never ran Manhattan, never had a seat at the five families table. But that didn't make them any less dangerous. They were small, tight-knit, and most importantly, they had nothing to lose. When a crime organization gets to that point, they become the kind of opponent Bumpy Johnson always watched closely. Quiet, no flash, but willing to use the dirtiest tactics to grab every inch of Harlem territory. And Sugar Hill, the sweetest, richest, best protected piece of Harlem, had been out of their reach for too long. One late-month evening, in the basement behind the kitchen of a small Italian restaurant on Mulberry Street, the Gagliano family heads sat around a cracked wooden table. The smells of burnt garlic, cheap wine, and overcooked beef mingled in the air. No one spoke for the first few minutes, just the wall clock ticking seconds like it was waiting for someone to break the silence. Finally, Don Salvatore Gagliano spoke, his voice low, a little raspy, but every word landed on the table like something heavy. "How many years has it been," he said, "and we still haven't touched Sugar Hill?" One underling tried a joke, "Because Mr. Johnson lives there." Salvatore didn't smile. No one did. A younger one licked his lips. "We could try one more time. Bring in muscle. Hit fast." Salvatore cut him off. If bullets could take down Johnson, he'd have been dead 20 years ago. The room went dead silent. Salvatore went on. "He doesn't die from guns. He doesn't live because of guns. Everybody keeps forgetting that." An underling asked quietly, "So what do we do?" "Not hit the man himself," Salvatore said. "Hit the one standing next to him." His hand tapped lightly on the table. A short list was slid into the center. On it were the names of Bumpy's 4 closest men. The first 3 names were crossed out. Only one name remained: Clarence Red Talbot. "Why him?" someone asked. Salvatore answered immediately, without needing to think: "Because he's desperate. Another one cut in, because he knows too much. A third added, and because he often goes alone. The whole room nodded. A desperate man is a man who can be broken. A man who knows a lot is valuable when he turns. A man who goes alone is easy to make disappear. Red had all three. Salvatore pushed back his chair and stood up. Not with money, he said. Money just makes a man hesitate. We need something that leaves him no choice. Family, a voice spoke up. His sick sister. Salvatore looked at the man and smiled for the first time in the meeting. Exactly. 2 days later, Red left the hospital where his sister was staying, face weary, eyes showing clear fear after hearing the doctor talk about the new costs. He didn't know someone was waiting for him from the bench across the street. An Italian guy with shiny shoes, a gray suit, too neat for someone sitting in the middle of Harlem. The guy stood up as Red got closer. Talbot. Red stepped back a little. Who's asking? Mutual friend, the guy said, and touched his jacket, signaling no weapon. Name's Tony Bellini. Red clenched his jaw. I don't know you, and I don't want to know you. Tony shrugged. I know your sister, Lottie, right? Got her test results this morning. Red froze. His eyes blinked once, but just once. Enough for Tony to know he'd hit the right spot. What do you want? Red asked. Tony didn't beat around the bush. Didn't offer an envelope of cash. Didn't persuade. Just lowered his voice. I want your sister to live. Red went pale. Tony went on. And I want you to live. But both those things depend on the same one. Red looked around. The street was empty. Just the distant sound of a trolley. Tony leaned in close to Red's ear and said the sentence Red would never forget for the rest of his life. In the elevator, it only takes 10 seconds. Nobody hears anything. Nobody sees anything. A metal box hanging between floors. Not a crime scene, just a technical malfunction. Red stood like a statue. Tony continued, voice unchanged. We're not buying you with money. We're buying you with time. The time your sister has left. A blow to a man's pride. He can still stand. But a blow to his family, that's what drags him to the bottom. Red knew he was being backed into a corner, and he hated it more than anything. He turned to walk away, but Tony's final words stopped him in his tracks. We talked to your sister's doctor this morning. You get what I mean. That wasn't a threat. That was a death sentence in the hallway. Red slow and clear. Red understood, and what hurt even more, he knew Tony was telling the truth. That night, Red sat alone in his cramped room, hands shaking from anger, from fear, from helplessness. He thought about Lottie, the one who'd raised him after their mother died, who'd taught him not to steal, not to betray friends, not to do things that make others have to bow their heads because of you. And now, to save that very person, he had to betray the man who'd saved him 9 years ago. There are no pretty choices in this world. Sometimes surviving means dying a part of yourself. When the clock struck midnight, Red picked up the phone and dialed the number Tony had given him. I'll do it. Tony didn't praise, didn't encourage, just said Friday, 11:42 p.m. In the elevator, Red hung up. He knew the way back had been closed long ago. What he didn't know was that Bumpy had locked the door in his own way too. Bumpy Johnson never believed in coincidences. He had a rule everyone close to him knew. If something unusual happens twice, it's not unusual anymore. It's a message. And Red Talbot, the man who'd been by his side for 9 years, had started leaving too many messages at once. It all started with a very simple comment from Eddie, the oldest elevator operator in the building, the one who'd been working there since the days when elevators were operated with a lever. Eddie never got deeply involved in anyone's business, but he knew how to watch people without letting them know he was watching. One morning, When Bumpy stepped into the elevator to go up to his seventh-floor office, Eddie tilted his head like he wanted to say something but hesitated. Bumpy saw the hesitation in his eyes and gave a slight nod. "Speak, Eddie." Eddie lowered his voice, just loud enough for Bumpy to hear. "Lately young Red been actin' kinda strange, Mr. Bumpy, going up and down a few times at night." And he paused. His old eyes checked both sides of the hallway, making sure no one was listening. "Yesterday I saw him talking to an Italian fella. Tall, hair slicked back, black shoes, looked like he was from Little Italy." Bumpy didn't ask more, didn't frown, didn't act surprised, just gave a short nod. "Good, thanks." The elevator stopped. Bumpy stepped out. Eddie stayed behind, watching him go. He'd seen plenty of betrayals, but never one where saying the name hurt him as much as this. Bumpy didn't react right away. He'd lived long enough to know that a truth only has value when you pull it out at the right moment, not the second you hear it. But that morning, sitting in his office looking out over the Harlem streets, he knew his instincts had been right. Something had changed in Red. Red avoided his eyes. Red stood a little farther back than usual when walking with him down the hallway. Red would leave meetings early, with excuses so simple they didn't even convince himself. But what caught Bumpy's attention most was the question Red asked one seemingly harmless afternoon. "Bumpy," Red said while going over the books, "that service elevator in the back lane, does it still work these days? I heard it gets stuck a lot." Bumpy looked up. That wasn't the question of someone curious about the building. That was the question of someone who wanted to know when the elevator gets stuck, wanted to know on which floor, wanted to know for how long. He just answered, "Yeah, sometimes. No more, no less." 2 days later, Bumpy noticed Red had switched jackets, not the soft leather one he usually wore. He picked a longer coat with wider sleeves, the kind big enough to hide something long and thin. A lot of people might overlook that detail. Bumpy didn't. He remembered every stitch on the clothes of his own people. He knew Red never chose long coats because they got in the way of drawing a gun. If Red was wearing that one, maybe he wasn't planning to draw a gun. And when a man who works in the shadows doesn't use a gun, he usually uses a knife. All that week, Bumpy stayed quiet. He let Red stand behind him in meetings, like always. He let Red open the car door for him. He let Red carry the briefcase, deliver envelopes, walk beside him through crowds. But he watched every step, every breath, every time Red turned his face away when Bumpy looked straight at him. He noticed the calls Red took in the hallway, the ones where Red hung up the second Bumpy's shadow appeared. The harder Red tried to hide, the clearer Bumpy saw, like a chess player who's seen 4 moves ahead. The second the opponent lifts the wrong piece, he knows exactly where the whole game is headed. In a small meeting at Small's Paradise, one of Bumpy's associates, Illinois Gordon, leaned in and whispered as soon as Red left the room, "You see it too? He ain't actin' normal." Bumpy answered, voice light as a breath, "He ain't the Red from 9 years ago." That was the first time he said it out loud. And once a thought is spoken, it becomes a truth you can't take back. But Bumpy didn't confront Red, didn't ask, didn't accuse, didn't force Red to explain. In his world, confronting too soon means losing the advantage. When someone's trying to hide a secret, the worst thing you can do is let them think they're still hiding it. Bumpy wanted Red to keep playing his role. He wanted Red to believe he suspected nothing. He wanted Red to walk all the way down the path he'd chosen, because only then would the full truth come out. And more importantly, Bumpy wanted to know who was behind it. Nobody betrays him alone. When Red started avoiding the usual routes and slipping around the back of the building late at night, Bumpy didn't follow, he just noted it. That's what real kings do. They don't chase rumors, They let the rumors come home to them. One evening, standing alone at his office window, watching the Harlem streetlights flicker in the wind, Bumpy said to himself, no one else around to hear, "Red ain't the Red from 9 years ago." Those words carried no anger, no sadness, just truth. And truth, to Bumpy Johnson, was always the starting point of a plan. He turned and walked out of the office. No coat, no calling his crew. Bumpy wasn't afraid of the dark, he just wanted to see which way it was falling on him. And from that moment, he started preparing, not to kill Red, not to save Red, but to teach Harlem, and whoever was behind Red, a lesson they would never forget. Bumpy Johnson never prepared the way other people prepared. He didn't stack weapons on the table, didn't tell his men to stand at the back door, didn't call anyone for backup. When he knew he was about to face a betrayer, he didn't build walls to block him. He opened the door so the man would walk in himself. With Red, this was truer than ever. Bumpy had seen the tremble in the choices Red was trying to hide. He knew Red wasn't the type to shoot in the street, wasn't the kind to plant a bomb or hire a hitter. Red would choose something clean, silent, unnoticed, and in a building like this one, there was no place quieter than the elevator. So Bumpy didn't set a trap, he prepared the space. 3 days before the elevator became the place that would decide the fate of 2 men, Bumpy went to see Oscar Granger, the building engineer. Oscar was a short, skinny man, with round glasses sliding down his nose. He'd worked here so long, he knew the sound of every cable, knew which elevator shook on which floor, knew which doors closed slower than the rest. But the most important thing was Oscar owed Bumpy a favor from years back. 2 things, Bumpy said the second he walked into the maintenance room. No questions why. Oscar nodded. No hesitation. 11:42 p.m. this Friday. Bumpy went on. Put elevator 3 in stall mode. Oscar blinked. Stall mode made the elevator stop dead between floors like a technical glitch. Hardly anyone outside maintenance even knew it existed. Kill all cameras in that area, Bumpy added. From floor 6 to 10. Oscar swallowed. How long? 3 minutes. Oscar looked at Bumpy for the first time since the conversation started. 3 minutes wasn't long, but it was long enough for a life to change direction, long enough for someone to disappear or someone to be forgiven. You want the cabin locked? Oscar asked quietly. Bumpy nodded. Nobody in, nobody ate. 3 minutes. Oscar didn't ask anything else. He knew it wasn't his business to know. Bumpy left the maintenance room and walked slowly down the dark hallway, like he was checking the heartbeat of the building itself. He placed his hand on the door of elevator number 3. Cold, silent, perfect. He knew Red would bring a knife, not a gun. Red wasn't the type to fire shots in an elevator and hope everything went smooth. Gunfire makes noise, leaves evidence, causes chaos. A knife is different. A knife is silent. A knife is the choice of desperate men who still want to hide their desperation. Bumpy also knew Red would stand behind him. That was the easiest way, the coward's way, and the least painful way for the attacker. But Bumpy didn't change his habit of taking the elevator alone, didn't change where he stood in the car, didn't change his schedule. That was the key. He did nothing to make Red suspicious. Illinois Gordon, who'd been by Bumpy's side for over 2 decades, was the first to realize he was preparing for something. Bumpy, Illinois said one afternoon. Something up with Red. Nothing, Bumpy replied. Illinois narrowed his eyes. Nothing, but you got the engineer setting up the elevator like he's digging a grave. Bumpy gently set his cigar down in the ashtray. I ain't burying nobody. Illinois, I just want to see who digs their own. Illinois went quiet. He knew Bumpy wasn't joking. In the last 2 days, Bumpy watched Red like a doctor watching a patient trying to hide symptoms. Red checked his watch more times than usual. Red tensed up when the phone rang. Red stood in the corner of the room, back turned to Bumpy longer. Red smiled less. Nobody but Bumpy saw all of it. The knife ain't out yet, Bumpy thought, but it's already cut into his mind. Friday night came slow and heavy, like a long confession. Bumpy sat in his office, listening to the sounds of Harlem outside the window. Cars, jazz music, people arguing on the street. Those sounds had followed him half his life, and they never distracted him. But tonight he wasn't listening to Harlem. He was listening to the silence coming closer. 11:40 p.m. Bumpy stood up, put on his coat. Red was right outside the door, in the exact spot he always stood when Bumpy left the building. "Ready to go, Bumpy?" Red asked, voice steady like any other day. "Yeah," Bumpy said, without looking him in the eye. They stepped into elevator number 3. Eddie, the elevator operator, gave a slight nod, like he was wishing someone luck in a fight he didn't want to watch. The doors closed. The minute hand on the wall clock ticked one notch. 11:42 p.m. And the building, as if obeying Bumpy Johnson's command, held its breath. The car stopped between the 7th and 8th floors. No jolt, no error signal, just dead still. Bumpy stared straight at the steel doors in front of him, not turning his head. Behind him, Red gripped the knife hidden in his sleeve. A man, Bumpy had once said, only shows his true nature when he thinks nobody's watching anymore. In that sealed metal box like a coffin, nobody could see them. Nobody could hear them. Nobody knew what was about to happen. Just two men, one who already knew everything and one who thought he could hide it all. The night of betrayal had arrived. The elevator hung motionless like a coffin suspended between floors, cold and sealed so tight the breathing of the two men sounded like metal scraping metal. Bumpy Johnson didn't move. He stood straight, hands loosely clasped in front of him, as if just waiting for the elevator to start again. But behind him, Clarence Red Talbot was falling apart. The blade in Red's hand didn't shake, but his wrist did, and Bumpy heard it with his ears, with his instincts, with the calm of a man who'd lived long enough to recognize the tremble of someone about to do something even he couldn't believe he was doing. Bumpy spoke before Red could take another half step. "You ain't shaken, 'cause you're scared of me." Red froze in place. Bumpy went on, voice steady as still water. "You shaken 'cause you know I'm right." Those words sliced clean through the thick shell Red had been building for 3 weeks. The cold in the elevator wasn't just in the steel, it was in Red's spine, running down his legs as he realized Bumpy had known for a long time. Red tried to speak, but his throat only let out a choked breath. Bumpy finally turned his head, slow, gentle, not a trace of fear or defense, like he was looking at an old friend who'd just dropped something, not a man holding a knife ready to cut his throat. "You think I didn't see?" Bumpy asked, a question that didn't need an answer. Red gripped the knife handle tighter, didn't step forward, didn't step back, just stood there, trapped between two versions of himself, the man from 9 years ago and the desperate one now. Bumpy laid it out, piece by piece, like he was reopening a file Red didn't know he'd been keeping. "Eddie told me first," Bumpy started. "You read in the elevator more than usual. Eyes not meetin' nobody's. Hands stayed in your pocket longer." Red lowered his head, jaw clenched tight. Eddie, the old elevator man. Red hadn't accounted for him. "Then the mail guy," Bumpy went on, "saw you talkin' to an Italian, black shoes, hair slicked back. Tony Bellini," the name Red had tried to bury inside like a stain he didn't want anyone touching. but Bumpy had touched it long before Red confessed. Red looked up, eyes panicked. You knew back then." Bumpy nodded slightly. "From the first look on your face, when you walked out of the hospital." Red wanted to say, "It ain't like that," but no words fit. None were true. None could save him. Bumpy took one more step, not threatening, not closing in, just close enough for Red to see the disappointment behind his eyes. "And the plumber," Bumpy continued. "You asked him about the private elevator. He told me in 5 minutes." Red closed his eyes. Everything he thought he'd hidden had never been hidden. Bumpy let out a long breath, like he'd just finished reading a sad passage from scripture. "You think I made it this far on what? Guns?" Red couldn't answer. Silence swallowed the car whole, only the faint hum of the cables overhead. Then Red gave up, not by dropping the knife, but by letting go of the hard shell he'd been holding onto. His voice choked. "I didn't want to do this. I duel, Lottie. The doctor said, if I don't pay the hospital bill this week." His voice broke in half. "Bellini said they'd help my sister. They'd let her live." Bumpy didn't move. He didn't interrupt, didn't mock, didn't get angry. He let Red talk, let Red pour out everything he'd been hiding in his heart. "I didn't have no other choice," Red said, tears starting to fall but no sobbing, just running down his face like oil leaking from a cracked pipe. "They said, if I didn't, Lottie wouldn't make it." Bumpy nodded, slowly. "You had a choice, Red," he said. "You just didn't choose me." Those words cut sharper than any blade Red was holding. He half collapsed, hand bracing against the elevator wall to keep from falling all the way. Bumpy bent down, picked up the knife from Red's hand like he was picking up a piece of paper off the floor. He turned it between his fingers, the steel glinting on his face like the light of a verdict. "You know what pisses me off the most?" Red didn't answer. "Not that you betrayed me," Bumpy said, "but that you thought I'd let your sister die." Red jerked his head up, eyes wide with horror. Bumpy went on, voice so low only the two of them could hear. "You forgot who I am. You forgot what Harlem is." He handed the knife back to Red, not as a weapon, but like a strange proof of forgiveness. "Harlem don't kill my people," Bumpy said. "Harlem lets them kill their own lives." Red understood. In Bumpy's world, that wasn't cruelty. That was justice. And it was also a second chance, the kind nobody says out loud. But everybody who's lasted long in Harlem knows the value of. When the elevator car gave a slight shudder and started moving again, neither man was holding the knife anymore. No need. The doors opened on the 8th floor. The hallway lights poured onto Red's face, making him look like someone who'd just survived a wreck more than a man who'd tried to kill the most powerful boss in Harlem. Red stepped out of the elevator, legs heavy as concrete. Behind him, Bumpy stayed in the car, not following, not calling him back. He just said one sentence, the last thing Red would ever hear from the man he'd once seen as family. "Go, and don't let Harlem see you again." Red didn't turn around. He walked into the shadows of the hallway and vanished from everyone's sight in the building, not dead, but no longer alive in Harlem either. And the elevator, as if it had never witnessed a thing, closed gently. The metal box slid upward, carrying one man who was still standing tall, and a lesson that everyone who ever dared go against Bumpy Johnson would have to learn. Red Talbot left the elevator like a shadow blown out of the life he'd known. He disappeared for real, not going home, not to the hospital, not to his usual bar. He slipped out of Harlem like water leaking into a sewer, leaving no trace, and that complete vanishing caused a bigger shock than any gunshot or explosion in the city. Word that Red wasn't dead spread faster than Red could run. The first to hear it was Eddie, the elevator operator. The second was the bartender at Small's Paradise. The third was some errand boy for Illinois Gordon. In just 2 hours, all of Harlem was whispering the same question. If Bumpy didn't kill Red, then what did Bumpy do? There was no answer, and the lack of an answer scared people more than the truth ever could. When the rumor reached the Gagliano family, the first reaction was confusion. Not confusion because the plan failed, but because it was the kind of failure with no dead body. In the underworld, death is clear. A corpse is a period at the end of a sentence. No corpse, that's a nightmare. That night, in the basement room of the Italian restaurant, Tony Bellini slammed his fist on the table. He let Red live. That guy's gonna talk everything. Don Salvatore Gagliano didn't answer right away. He just stared into the glass of wine he was gently swirling, like the answer Tony would never have the patience to see was in there. Finally he said, voice so soft everyone had to lean in to hear, if he didn't kill Red. He set the glass down, gently, but hard enough to silence the whole table. That means we are already dead. Nobody dared breathe loud. Tony's eyes bulged. What the hell you talking about? We gotta shut Red up before he... Salvatore waved him off. If Mr. Johnson wanted Red to talk, Red woulda talked already. The room sank into a truth so cold nobody could swallow it. Bumpy Johnson didn't kill Red not out of mercy, but because he didn't need to. If Red talked, the Gaglianos lost face. If Red stayed quiet, the Gaglianos still lost. And if Red vanished, nobody knew what Bumpy had said to him. Nobody wants to go up against a man who can cause more damage without killing than most can with a hit. Salvatore stood up. We pull out of Harlem. Tony shot back right away. Give up Sugar Hill. Give up the policy banks. Give up everything we built. Salvatore spoke in a weary but certain voice. What we built in Harlem ain't worth dying for. And more importantly, it ain't worth letting Bumpy think we're worth killing. Nobody argued. When a man like Salvatore says something like that, everybody knows the game is over. In less than one night, the Gagliano crew pulled out of every spot in Harlem. Asterisk the bootleg liquor stores, asterisk the gambling joints, asterisk the alleys where they used to collect protection, asterisk the apartments where they had guys watching, asterisk all of Sugar Hill. Not a drop of blood, not one announcement. They vanished like they'd never been there. The strange part wasn't that the Gaglianos ran. The strange part was they ran because nobody died. All the small-time gangs in Harlem knew the unwritten rule. Asterisk, if Bumpy kills somebody, it means he wants to end it. Asterisk, if Bumpy spares somebody, it means it's just getting started. They watched Red disappear from Harlem like a ghost. They watched the Gaglianos pull out like dogs running from hail. They watched Bumpy walk the streets like any other day. No extra bodyguards. No new routes, no looking over his shoulder. In the criminal world, not changing anything is the sign of absolute power, and Harlem understood that. A hustler on 145th Street told his friend, Mr. Johnson don't need a gun to fight. He just lets people scare themselves with the question, how much does he know? A grocery store owner lady said, I don't know what Mr. Bumpy said in that elevator, but I know it was enough to make them Italians run for their lives. A bookie chuckled. The way he don't do nothing, that's scarier than anything he ever did. Red didn't die, but he lost everything in one night. His home. He didn't dare go back. Lottie. He didn't dare see her. His friends. He didn't dare call. Harlem. No place for him anymore. For most men in the rackets, death is the end. But for Red, survivin' was the punishment. He caught the 5 a.m. train out of New York the next morning, without looking back. Not because he was scared Bumpy would change his mind, but because he knew Bumpy had been right from the first sentence. Go, and don't let Harlem see you again. That wasn't a threat, that was a verdict, and Red, in a strange way, accepted it like a man accepting the lightest sentence he could ever get. In the week that followed, Harlem was noticeably quieter, not quiet from fear, but from respect, because everybody understood. Bumpy Johnson didn't kill Red, but he made a whole Mafia family run, not with violence, not with threats, not with a declaration of war, but with silence. Silence in the elevator, silence in the night, silence in the way he went back to work, like nothing had happened. Harlem whispered to each other, "It ain't what he does that scares people, it's what he don't do." And that's exactly why Bumpy Johnson didn't just survive, he kept on ruling, not with gunfire, not with blood, but with the only kind of power a truly strong man has, the power to make his enemies punish themselves. Harlem was peaceful again, the kind of peace that makes people walk soft, talk low, and respect something they never saw with their own eyes, but everybody knows is real. That night, after Red vanished into the 8th-floor hallway, like a soul leaving its body, Bumpy Johnson didn't go home right away. He went back to his office on the 7th floor, a familiar room with the yellow glow from the desk lamp, the smell of old papers, and the sound of Harlem drifting in through the window like the steady breath of a big beast, a beast he'd lived with, controlled and protected for half his life. Bumpy hung his coat on the chair and sat down in the leather seat that had been with him for years. In front of him was a glass of cognac. He poured it slowly, not to savor it, but like he was measuring each drop of this night, a night with no shots, no screams, no bodies, but strong enough to shake all of Harlem in a way violence never could. He took a small sip, let the warmth slide down his throat, then leaned back in the chair. Nobody around, no crew, no meetings, no voices breaking the quiet. Just him, the dark, and thoughts about Red Talbot. 9 years standing side by side in secret meetings. 9 years sharing the most dangerous streets in Harlem. 9 years with no extra questions, no signs of greed, no moments of weakness. Bumpy wasn't the type to trust easy, but he had trusted Red, and Red had betrayed him. Not for money, not for power, but out of fear. Fear of losing the last family he had left. Bumpy understood that, but understanding don't mean forgiving. Forgiving don't mean forgetting. He set the glass down, fingers brushing lightly over the cool wood surface of the desk. A thought passed like wind outside the window. Loyalty is a straight line, but life always tries to bend it into a curve. He said it out loud, not for anyone to hear, but so he could look the truth straight in the eye. Even the best ones, the most loyal ones, can break if life bends them in just the right spot. And Clarence, Red Talbot, had been bent in the most vulnerable spot in his heart. Bumpy wondered, could he have stopped it? Could he have helped Red sooner? He wondered once, then let it go, because in this world, not every question needs an answer. A long moment of silence passed, then another thought came, sharp as the knife that had never left his neck in the elevator. A betrayer don't die from the blade. He dies when he sees himself in the eyes of the man he betrayed. Bumpy didn't kill Red. He didn't need to. Red had killed the version of himself in that dark steel box, died in the eyes of the man he'd respected more than anyone. And for people who live in the shadows, sometimes that's the most painful death of all. Bumpy stood up and walked to the window. Below him, Harlem glowed with cheap bulbs, distant jazz music drifting in the air. Footsteps, tapping the pavement like the never-stopping heartbeat of the city. A city that had seen blood, tears, gang wars, hits the newspapers never got right, nameless deaths, lives nobody remembered. Bumpy's Harlem, Harlem of people who rose from the shadows, Harlem of rules never written down, but everybody understood. He looked down at the sparse flow of people, his gaze growing heavier. Tonight, he hadn't just lost a man he'd once called his own. He'd lost a small piece of himself, a piece he'd placed his trust in. Trust, always the most fragile thing in this world. Bumpy went back to his chair, poured another glass of cognac, then spoke to himself in a voice so low it almost blended with the hum of the heater. Real power don't come from violence. He took a sip, not from gunfire. Another sip. Power comes from information. He set the glass down again, from patience. Then he lifted his head, eyes lighting up cold, like he'd just finished reading a page from his own private scripture. And above all, power comes from silence. Silence had made Red confess. Silence had made the Gaglianos run. Silence had kept Harlem peaceful. Silence had left every enemy wondering, what does Bumpy know? What will Bumpy do? What is Bumpy thinking? In Bumpy Johnson's world, a threat can scare you for one night, but silence can scare you for a lifetime. He closed his eyes, leaned back in the chair, letting the warmth of the cognac mix with the quiet wrapping around the room. No gunfire, no knife, just the final conclusion, light as Red's footsteps leaving Harlem, but heavy as the unspoken oath of the boss of Harlem. In Harlem, silence speaks louder than any bullet. If this story made you feel the true power of silence, hit subscribe so you don't miss the other secrets of Harlem. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video, where one small decision can change the direction of an entire empire.